there was so much going on in Iraq that spring that things would get a bit confusing, but fortunately my main interpreter, Harb, and I had found a man, a senior political scientist at Baghdad University, and we would go interview him to get his perspective on what was happening. And so I'd like to read you a short bit of one of those interviews. One day as we neared the end of April, Harb drove me to the other side of his neighborhood of Adamiyah. The setting sun was bathing the nearby groves of date palms in a dark orange when we pulled in front of the old but elegant home of Dr. Wamid Omar Nathmi on the banks of the Tigris River, directly across from the sprawling green zone. We were escorted into his sitting room by one of his sons before Dr. Nathmi entered. The old stately professor greeted us formally, then immediately lit a cigarette and engaged Harb in some small talk in Arabic before getting to my questions. An outspoken critic of the former regime, Dr. Nathmi was truly a nationalist and had always worked for the Iraqi people, rather than any particular sect or political party. It quickly became apparent to me that he had no qualms about criticizing U.S. policy. Quote, "Once you abide by the policy of the USA, you're not a terrorist anymore. In 1991, Syria was not a terrorist because they supported the war against Iraq. Syria opposed the recent invasion, so now they are a terrorist state," he explained. When I asked what he thought about the Bush administration's claim that Iraq was the front line of the so-called war on terror, he replied, "Here one would have to distinguish between terrorism and resistance. Terror was unseen here before the invasion. In Fallujah, it is not terrorism, it is resistance." We spoke of U.S. policy throughout the Middle East. When I asked the professor about Palestine, he said, "The crimes against humanity in Palestine are shown daily on the television. This does not indicate that the current U.S. administration is committed to democracy or human rights. How can the United States, a war criminal in Palestine, be accepted as a state builder in Iraq?" We had a lengthy discussion on the reality in Iraq, where more and more Iraqis had long since woken up to the fact that the true U.S. agenda was not for the liberation or benefit, but for the oil and its own geostrategic military position. "The Americans' war against Iraq is over," he told me. "Now we have the war of Iraq against America. It is a war of Iraqis fighting for their country, their homes, their money, and their lives."